because the reality is that, even way back to when we were little girls into our childhood, we've been getting messages and rules from family, from culture, from as we get older into our workplaces, we've been getting rules and expectations about how we should and should not show up.
You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hey there, No Labels, No Limits podcast listeners. Welcome back for another week of the podcast. I'm Sarah Box, your host. And as you know, we're on a mission to help individuals, teams, and organizations think outside of the box and move beyond limiting labels, beliefs, assumptions, right? And we do this by sharing accomplished and inspiring guests who have challenged their own limiting labels and beliefs, gone through their own life transitions, and come back so that we can all learn and grow with them and maybe bring some new nuggets we haven't considered before. And today's guest is no different. In fact, we've been spending time just chatting. And I thought, it's time to actually do the interview because she's very interesting. So anyway, our guest is Ellie Steinbrink. And she's an ex-marketer turned expert stylist, personal brand coach, and dynamic speaker, which you'll pick on right away. But her journey is really inspiring because she transitioned from 20-year career in marketing to founding her own business. And think about that. If you've been in a corporate career for 20 years, that's a big step to go into your own business. And the name of her business is Style Decoded. And she focuses on empowering professional women like you and me and our friends and neighbors define and express our unique personal brand through style. And she'll talk to us about what she means by style, but her passion really is about helping women break free from cultural and professional style constraints to embrace authentic style and truly represent who we are. And I really am excited to learn from her because it's so interesting to see how perceptions and what we feel we have to be constrained, who we really are at our core. And I'm looking forward to what Ellie has to say about that. So I'm going to talk about why fitting in is a problem, the impact of what we wear, how it is greater than we think it might be. And then always interested to know is how standing out can be something that conveys competence, confidence, and power, and the benefit of that. So with that little short introduction, let me welcome Ellie to the podcast officially. Hi, Ellie.
Hi, Sarah. I'm so glad to be here. Like you said, we had such a good little conversation going. I forgot that we needed to hit record.
I know. I love it. I just love it because you bring so much, but let's get on to, before we get into the impact and style and all of that, I do like to know a little bit about how did you switch from your 20-year career to this? Like, did you always know you wanted to go in this direction? What was a tipping point? Bring us up to speed.
Okay. Yeah, it is not your typical career path, is it? And to some degree, it surprised me. Although when it actually and finally happened, it all sort of made sense. But let's not start there. Let's go a little bit further back. I mean, this goes back even to when I was a little girl. I mean, I've been dressing up and I think I changed outfits probably 5 times a day, and I drove my mom crazy. Now being a mom, I understand probably how frustrating that would have been to wash so many clothes. But I remember being very in tune with style and loving what I wear and clothes from a very early age. And that just always was with me. And as I grew up, and got to the age where I needed to decide what I'm doing for a living, I always was, I guess that was always there in the back of my mind, but I never once thought to myself, I want to go into that. I never thought I'm going to go into fashion or I'm going to go into style. In fact, I ended up going into marketing, as you shared. And, I worked primarily in advertising agencies, although I did, work in corporate as well, but I was in a client service role. And, I started like many college students did at the time. I got an internship at an agency that I really wanted to work at, and I just continued to work my way up the ladder. And I really thought that this was what I was going to do with my life. I loved the creative environment of marketing. I loved so many aspects of marketing, the creativity. And at some point along the line, as I just kept moving up and up and up the ladder, I started to grow discontented. I felt more burned out than ever. I was starting to wonder, why am I not enjoying this? Or why am I not wanting to dive deeper into the things I knew I needed to be doing to continue to grow in that career? And this was sort of like an underlying current as I was continuing to push myself in a very demanding industry that required me working lots of hours. And towards the end of that time, I had had both of my kids, and I was really feeling, not only, a burnout of a demanding career that required a lot of time, of my time and energy, but the energy drain of not really feeling like you're in the right position, the energy drain of having, little kids, the energy drain of having a husband who travels. And so I'm often alone and doing it on my own. And all of this was just sucking the life out of me. But at that point, I had officially reached the top of that ladder, so to speak. I was the director of client services. It was the role that I thought that I wanted. It was the role that, I was reaching for. And I got there and I had zero satisfaction, which if anybody listening has been in this position, you might identify with how, or maybe you're in it right now. You can identify with how scary this feels, because at one point, all you want to do is desperately make a change. And at the other side of the coin is that you're really too scared to, because you don't know what else you would do. And it's too scary to even just admit that, oh my gosh, I don't think I even really like this. And, long story short, I was lucky to at that time have some people. I was working with a business coach actually that was my company hired, and we were all getting a chance to work with her. And I was starting to realize that maybe marketing wasn't the end all be all of what I wanted to do. And I was letting myself, come to terms with that fact, even just that step alone, is coming to that truth that maybe this isn't for me. And maybe that's why I feel so drained every day. That's part of the reason. And the next change, I ended up deciding to leave that company. And the next step I made was in another marketing role. But the thing I will say is I had identified at that point that I knew I wanted to work just a little bit less, because work was overtaking my life. And if you've been in a situation where you're working a lot, you know that it's really hard to think or be clear when there's so much activity and you're going a million miles an hour. Like I couldn't even, if someone had said to me at that time, well, what do you really want to do? I couldn't answer that question because I was just moving so quickly.
There was no space.
There was no space.
Settle into you.
Exactly. No space to listen, to even feel. It was just do. So, but
pause just one sec, Ellie, because you said that like we all get it, but I want to underscore how important what you just said is. There's no space to feel. And it's so easy to get into our head of thinking. We've got our list. We know our metrics. We want to do this and that. But we need space. Maybe not big time spaces, but enough space so we can actually feel what's happening in our body. Are we stressed? Are we like running? Are we on edge? And then, so I just think that's a really important thing you just said, that you didn't even have space to feel. So then, no, go ahead.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that point of me, and it's still something I have to continue to wrestle with. My whole life, I really didn't, when it came to like achieving things, going after my goals, I didn't really involve a lot of feeling. It was a thinking matter, as you're saying. It was kind of like, it doesn't matter how you feel. And in growing up, I grew up on a farm, and it was kind of like, you just get the work done. You don't really care about how you feel. You just go do it. And no discredit to my upbringing, but that was just sort of the way of it. You just dive in, and it's like, you're tired. Who cares? You just keep going. And so I thought I was doing the right thing by just pushing and pushing and pushing. But I realized that it was ruining me. I was getting really sick. I was ending up in the emergency room. So my body was giving me all these clues this needs to stop. You can't keep going at this pace. So this idea of like checking off the boxes and just doing what I think is right wasn't going to serve me. So I knew I needed some more time and space, to your point. And this next role I took, I actually, it was kind of like a needle in a haystack because I wanted to cut back on my hours. I wanted officially more of like a part-time role. So meaning about 30 hours a week. And the reason for that is my daughter was starting into the school system, and I had done some work with my values, and I thought I really want to be there when she leaves for school. I want to be there when she comes home, and which would allow me more free time too on, you know, on the ends of my work, but I didn't want to stop working. And when you start to look for part-time jobs, I found it was difficult to find what I wanted. I wanted to continue to be challenged and to find something that I was excited about, but also just work less. But I found this needle in a haystack. It was still in marketing. But I ended up being at that job for 4 years, and it ended in 2020, ironically, when the pandemic hit and I actually lost my job. But rewind a little bit, when I was still working at this second place doing marketing in this part-time role, I came across a bout of insomnia, kind of out of the blue. And it was awful. It went on for about a year. And one of the things I remember doing during that time to give myself some quote unquote rest was I had learned how to do transcendental meditation. And so I started meditating, and my employer at the time was very into meditation. And so she actually put me through the training and was very much encouraging of us, you know, taking a 20-minute meditation break during our work time. And so I was doing just that at that time to get myself quote unquote rest. And I remember very distinctively in, you know, one of these meditation sessions, and I opened my eyes at the conclusion of the session. I just remember thinking, I need to do something about this style. And I don't even know where it came from, honestly. I mean, it's not like I had been thinking and planning about it for years and years. And it was just sort of like my subconscious came up to the conscious level. And I know this sounds very woo-woo, and I'm not suggesting that if you start meditating, you're going to get the aha moment you need. But I think this goes back to that quietness and that space. I think that I really needed to tune into a deeper voice and a deeper longing in me. So this happened, and the day it happened, I listened. In fact, I thought, okay, what can I do right now that could help me start to lean into this little poke I got from the universe, I guess we'll call it. And I said, I'm going to start posting all these ideas and thoughts I have about style. I'm going to start an Instagram channel, an account, and I'm just going to start doing this every day. And I made a promise to myself that, you know, if it's fun and I feel engaged by it, I'm just going to keep doing it. And if it's not fun, or I get bored with it, or it becomes a burden, I'm just going to stop. Because at that time, I had no intentions of quitting my job. In fact, my employer knew about it, and she was like, that's great. You know, you can do this on the side and continue your job. So and I never stopped.
But another thing about what you just shared that I want myself and the listeners to think about is you weren't having black and white thinking. Like, I can't play around on Instagram and keep my job. It's like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to test it, which is very entrepreneurial, right? I'm just going to put my toe in the water, see what I think. And when we take that pressure off of ourselves, then we're more likely to play and test things like, oh, I kind of like that post. I like this thread. I don't like that so much. We don't have to do it, right? We not do it because our life depends on it. We get to play a bit with it. So you added some time to be silent, and then you added play and took the pressure off yourself.
I did, which is really odd, Sarah, because the thing about me is that I tend to be a very black and white thinker. I tend to be somewhat, yeah. Well, I tend to like want to have a plan, and it was also odd to me, and that has come up before when people hear the story, is like, it's odd that for some reason you just let those things go out the window, but for some reason I did. And I think I didn't really tell that many people about it. I just started it. And if they asked me, I was like, I don't know, I'm just doing a thing over here, you know? So I think not attaching any expectation to it was really important. And I'm glad you pointed that out. And it really was fun. And what that led me to after I started was people started reaching out, and I started to do some little styling on the side. And then here comes 2020 and the pandemic hits. And just because of the industry I was working in at the time, there was a lot of uncertainty about what was going to happen with the business. And so I lost my job, and I knew I had a complete certainty that at that time I wanted to keep going and start my business in styling and speaking.
Fine for us when you say styling, because I've had conversations with other people around time, or you can read on Instagram where define for us when you're saying styling. What is under your umbrella when you consider styling? What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you asked, because I think if you put 10 stylists here, it might sound a little different because all of us do slightly different things. But what it means for me is I knew I wanted to combine my marketing and branding background because that was something I knew intimately. And I really loved working. I've been in corporate environments all my life, and I really wanted to work with women, executive women working in the corporate space, or entrepreneurs or small business owners. And so I sort of combined those two loves. And what that looks like for me is working one-to-one with clients on defining what their personal style is. So before we even step foot in a store, virtual store, I should say, we do a lot of work up front to sort of define, who you want to become. What is she wearing? How should clothes fit into your life now? Especially post pandemic, what do you need to get dressed for? And then we actually start, if they want to continue doing, building out a wardrobe. I do seasonal wardrobes, and I do it all virtually. And, people wonder, how do you do this virtually? But luckily, there's amazing tools that make it very seamless. So on top of the one-to-one work I do with individual women to help them build their wardrobes and kind of define what that personal style brand is, I also do things like I'm doing now, and I have a great passion for helping women understand that style is so much more than what we've taught it to, but what we've been taught it to be. So that being, trends and runways and just kind of trite or self-indulgent. What I understand and what I've always used style as is a tool to not only change how others perceive you, but how you perceive yourself. And actually, I think the latter part of that statement is one of the most important. And so I really like the education piece of it and helping women understand that style is so much more than what we've been led to believe. So yeah, that's what styling is for me. I've never stepped foot once in any one of my clients' houses yet. The transformations have been incredible. So,
well, two things. One, I have a question for you, but again, your observation, you keep dropping these really important notes. And that's why I'm interrupting you, because I don't want to miss the point you've made that style changes us.
yes.
So, right, we're not there to please other people, but and I heard someone say this once, and ever since they said it, I thought that's so right. And they said, when you get up and you dress for you, whether that means putting on lipstick or not, whatever you are, who you are, if you know who that is, and you dress for you so that you feel good about you, it changes how you act. And I've been camping. My husband goes, "Oh, really? You're going to take that extra minute?" I said, "This ain't for you, mister. This is for me." It's like,
I love that.
Well, it is, it's for him. It's for anybody I interact with, right? But it's for me so I don't feel slouchy or crummy. And I'm not talking high fashion. I'm not a high fashion gal, but it's just taking that moment to say, I see you, Sarah. I like you, Sarah. Let's be comfortable, Sarah. And whatever that is. Now, I'm not as far along in being able to select things like that as I'd like to be, Ellie, but I've learned some. And that's why this is interesting for me to have you talk more about this. So when you work with someone, say we're working with one, where are we starting?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to echo back to something you just said, because it actually is a place I start when I work one-to-one with clients. When you said, I get up in the morning and I do this for me because I like how it makes me feel and it changes me, right? It changes maybe how I show up to that day.
Yep.
And there is actual brain science behind this, Sarah. So what happens is when we have a feeling, now put yourself, squarely in your closet in the morning,
No.
you have a feeling. Yeah. You have a feeling in your closet every morning. And many of the women I talk to say, sometimes it's not the greatest feelings in there, right? I would say most of the women I interact with say it's not always the greatest experience in there. Either I feel deflated, I feel unmotivated, uninspired, things don't fit. Maybe I'm just, it's not always the best experience in there. But what happens is when we have a feeling, our brain activates and sends chemicals throughout our entire body. And those chemicals can actually change the entire makeup of our cellular system. So again, going back to the closet, we have, let's say, a not so great feeling in our closet because maybe nothing we want to wear is clean because we have no time. We had no time to do it this week and the laundry piled up. Or maybe we're just maybe not at the size we wish we were because of this, that, or the other reason. Or for whatever reason, like we've switched jobs and now nothing seems to work. There are lots of reasons to not feel great in our closet, but that feeling then translates into the rest of our day, into the actions and the behaviors that we take. I know for me, if I'm not feeling the greatest, I tend to get a little snippy with the people around me. I hate to even admit that, but it is true. I just kind of hide. I'm probably doing the menial tasks on my to-do list. I'm not going for those big tasks that I know I need to do. So my energy is off. I'm definitely not as excited about turning like my Zoom camera on. When I've talked to other women, I know they'll tell me that like I'll just kind of hide out at my desk instead of kind of putting myself out there. Or think about like even yourself in a networking situation. If you're not feeling the greatest, are you going to go introduce yourself? Probably not. And those feelings translate into our actions, which then translate into our results. And and that all starts with this one little decision that we made in our closet, which most of us would think is really not that big of a decision in any given day, right? There's so many big decisions we make in a day, and it seems like our clothing choice should not be that important. But that's the reality of the matter, is that one little instance can either propel your day forward or it can really hold you back.
So let me ask you this question. When in that scenario you just described, walking into the closet, not feeling so great for all the reasons, valid reasons that you mentioned, right? Like, oh, laundry, this or that, feeling bloated, whatever.
Yep.
Well, welcome to women's world.
Exactly. You never know what you're going to get.
It is what it is. But I'm wondering at that point, if even overlaid on that is the expectations, external environments we put on ourselves from like at work, like, are we supposed to look this way, or are we supposed to look this way, versus we had to walk out in our t-shirt and jeans, but we were feeling great. What would that feel like? Do you understand what I'm trying?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's another piece we really hone in on when either if it's in a training or working one-to-one is we need to do some deprogramming. Because the reality is that, even way back to when we were little girls into our childhood, we've been getting messages and rules from family, from culture, from as we get older into our workplaces, we've been getting rules and expectations about how we should and should not show up. And some of these are very obvious. Like I know I have experiences from my childhood where someone said something to me and, that one comment then changed my decisions about what I did or didn't wear for like the next 30 years, and so women will tell me very defined experiences that they remember that kind of made them turn and go another direction. And sometimes they're not as obvious. So one thing we do is we start digging into what are maybe some rules or expectations that you're following that don't even make sense to follow anymore. And I think what can be difficult is over time, and I'm almost 45 now. All of these experiences sort of just form together and you kind of don't remember why you're following them, but you certainly are. And you have a real fear because you've been programmed to kind of believe that if you go this way, some bad things might happen. Kind of your very elemental brain is like, that's scary. Don't go there. So to start to unwind some of that programming can feel scary, but it can also feel very liberating. So, here's even just a very simple example I hear from a lot of women I work with that are in, especially in, certain industries where, the expectations is that you're wearing black suits or navy suits or, it's just a very like masculine dominated industry. And everyone's done it. That's just how you show up. And so when I ask them, like, well, what would it feel like for you to wear, what would you want to wear? I'd like, well, I would love to wear color. Maybe I'd like to wear a different colored suit, but everybody else is in these black suits or these navy suits. And I feel like I would stand out. And that feels very scary to me. So we have to start to question, well, is it a rule that that you have to wear black? No, we don't necessarily have to. What would it feel like to you to actually show up in something different? And again, that feels very scary, but it's also a step towards something that feels more authentic to you. So yeah, and what I've found is women don't have just one experience they can tell me about. It's a handful of things that they've picked up through the years that have now become a rule. And it can be things as simple as, I don't wear horizontal stripes because women of my size don't wear horizontal stripes. And I'm like, well, we don't need to be following that rule anymore, or I wear black only because I feel like that's the most slimming color. There's just all sorts of things to unpack. And so along with, just really trying to decide, one, just notice where maybe it doesn't make sense to follow those rules. And I realize some of these rules are really hard to undo, especially if it's how we feel about our body. So it's a process. It's a process of understanding that I can choose to go a different direction. I don't have to keep succumbing and conforming to what others want from me, because it really doesn't feel good to conform, does it? At the end of the day,
doesn't it make you a little grumpy? It's like, excuse me, who made you the boss of me? But yeah. I'm joking, but sometimes it's so subtle we don't know we're doing it.
Yes. And we start to change our behaviors and our decisions based off of those little rules we create over time. And at some point we just kind of get so far away from ourselves, we don't even really know where to start, right? So it's unpacking that and then starting to say, well, what would you really love? Like, what is one thing you're afraid to do because you think you've created this rule around it? And that example of color often comes up. Well, I'd really love to just wear this color and not worry about it. There's a lot of things that come up around, well, I'm a certain age, so women of my age, we just don't wear this anymore. That's a rule. And we just need to unpack that and say, well, okay, we can start to move something towards something that feels great to you, but we have to tune in back to ourselves. And I think, what we've been talking about, even just with my origin, my story of how I came into the styling business, it took a lot of me just tuning in back into me instead of tuning into what I thought, what everyone wanted me to do or where I thought I needed to go. And I tell you what, it feels so good to just finally listen to yourself, and that's really the biggest transformation that occurs. Obviously, when I'm working with clients, there are clothes involved and outfits and all the fun things. But the most fun thing is they don't feel like they're subscribing to someone else's version of style. They're subscribing to theirs,
Yeah. And then my sense is, if I'm right, so correct me if I'm not, if you have your own sense and you feel great, there are benefits to you and to those that you're working with if you're in a professional setting. Is that right?
Absolutely. So we were talking about fitting in versus standing out. And
that's what I was going to ask you.
Well, it feels scary to stand out, doesn't it? I mean, our whole lives, I feel as if there's a strong human desire just to want to fit in. And because I have a teenage daughter, boy, do I see the power of wanting to fit in. She started 6th grade last year. And, there's just a real strong desire to be like everybody else, wear what they're wearing, to be a part of something bigger. And the ironic thing is when I put my marketing hat on, Sarah, because I've been doing marketing all these years, I've been meeting with clients, consulting with them on their brands. Never once have I ever had a client ask me, how can I be more like my competitors? How can I just sound just like them, look just like them? No. What they ask me is, how can I stand out and be unique and be authentic? What is special about us that we can highlight? And it's ironic that we all know that about building great brands, but it's harder when you put it into your own personal brand, right? But it really is the key to success. And there actually have been studies around, this idea of standing out. It's called the red sneaker effect. And so they studied Harvard psychologists studied individuals who intentionally did something with their clothing to stand out. And when it was done in an authentic way, so think of maybe a professor that's wearing red sneakers, or a bow tie, something they've done or even I think about Steve Jobs when, a very successful man wearing sneakers and a turtleneck, as his go-to style. When someone kind of intentionally veers, off the beaten path, out of the box, as you might say, that actually sends a positive message that conveys confidence, competence, and power. So I feel like this thing we've been fearing, this fearing of standing out, can actually be a really good thing. It just takes a little bit of courage and a nudge to say, okay, this feels uncomfortable, but there are many benefits to me just showing who I am.
Yeah. And when you start doing it, I will say for myself, and this is an aspiration I have, is to be able to do more and more of it. You'd think with all the decades I've been on the planet, I'd be somewhere further, but I am where I am. And the one thing about doing it is the things that I chose to do at one age that seemed really kind of scary. I'm like, oh, man, I've done more since. But it has helped me to have people like you say, what about this? You could do that,
Yes.
And my sister, one time we were like in a used resale store, and she goes, this would be great on you. I'm looking at him going, no way. Right. So I buy it and I wore the heck out of it. I'm going, wow,
And you loved it.
Feels like me, because she could see me at that moment better than I could see me.
Yes. Yes.
So that's the value of having a mirror of someone who you trust, and also who has your best interest at heart, because it could have gone bad.
Yes.
Different if we
it could have gone. But I think you said something there that I want to highlight, because, you could think about this whole like standing out thing as, I'm just going to put on something shocking. I'm going to walk into this industry event wearing something no one would consider to wear. And I think there's a fine line. The authenticity piece is really key. What you said about, I felt great in it, is the key, because, and it's actually why when I work with my clients, I start with this asking the question of, who am I becoming? Who's the woman I'm becoming? Because I really want to understand where they want to go and how they see themselves and what goals they have, in order to just kind of come at this angle of, well, then how does my style align with that version I'm becoming? Because honestly, if someone comes to me today, the first day I'm meeting them, I can definitely style you and make you look awesome. But the question is, how do you feel in that outfit? And if you feel sort of like a fraud, it's going to fall flat on its face. So it has to come from within. Maybe it's embracing a color you really love, or a certain silhouette, or maybe you just love wearing pants and you don't want to wear dresses and skirts, even though culture might tell us that that's what women wear. Or you don't want to wear high heels. You want to like rock the sneakers. So I think it needs to come from an authentic place in order for it to be successful. Otherwise you'll see through it.
It just feels fake. Or, and I will say me, I know there are other women I've spoke to who feel similarly, not all women, but when it doesn't feel authentic to you, I feel constrained. Like I'm not willing to call a ton of attention to myself, because I'm so like conscious, right? I'm like,
yes.
Or like you said, snippy. It's like,
short, short.
I'm just not expansive. I don't feel like emoting or anything. So this isn't about just mirroring what we see other people doing, but it's really sounds to me like you're doing some like clothes therapy.
It is. I mean, honestly, it's hard to disconnect the two, right? And the thing I'll say about tuning into your feelings, it is difficult for that very reason you said, because we're so used to listening to what others say or what they believe, especially when it comes to about what we should wear. And one of the first things, even if I've done some shopping for clients, the first question I ask them, because they'll say, what do you think? Does it look good on me? Is this working? And I'll say, well, how do you feel in it? Because that is actually the number one most important question. We can talk about fit and whether it's working with your body and all those things. But how you feel is really the most important. And so yeah, the more you can tune into that. And I think just with the way the fashion industry has gone, it's very transactional, the way we interact with our clothes. We can acquire clothes very quickly. We can toss them very quickly. And that is exactly what many people do. No judgment. I'm not saying with this is with judgment. I'm just saying it's a fact. The way we think about clothes these days is we can get it and we can get rid of it very quickly. And so that's a transactional relationship. What I want is a more connected relationship. So one of the questions I get a lot is, okay, this sounds great. I want to feel better in my clothes. I want to wear what feels good to me, but I don't really know where to start. It's really difficult to figure that out. So here's one really easy place to start. You can do it this week. You can do it today. You can do it tomorrow. I want you just to start to notice as you go into your closet and you put things on or you're looking at what's hanging there. I want you to just notice how you feel. Really try to tune into how you feel in those clothes. Because I know there's a lot of things hanging in our closet. There's a lot of emotional things. There's a lot of things that don't fit, things people gave to us, things we hang on for reasons that we don't really need to be keeping. But if we really tune into, okay, how does this make me feel? Does it make me feel light as air, or does it kind of drag me down and make me feel worse about myself, or I feel like I'm fidgeting and just uncomfortable, or maybe it's itchy? Those things don't have any place in your closet. So that's one very small step you can just take today to start to kind of clear out the clutter of the things that are just doing you no good.
And it's more than just a space clutter. It's the mental head clutter that it takes, right?
Absolutely.
And back to how does it make me feel? So if we're going so fast, we don't even have time to go, how does it make me feel? So you keep coming back, whether you know it or not, but I'm just going to tell you.
Yeah, tell me. You're so observant.
You know what cracks me up? I feel like I've known you for years. So I'm like, oh, let me tell you. But truthfully, you keep coming back to this whole concept of you have to check in with yourself.
Yeah.
How does this itchy, scratchy, right? And there are things that you're going, I've had shirts that I love the look of them, but I'm like, well, there's just one place that's scratchy. You got to go. I'm not wearing you. Nope. You know, I don't care that someone gave it to me, blah, blah, blah. But like you said, we have a lot of rules. So it's like, well, it was a gift. You know, I'm thinking, well, they're never going to know.
Uh-huh. Or I spent a lot of money on it. That's another one. It feels like it would be a waste if I don't wear it.
So I've started doing this, but someone is waiting for this exact piece and they don't know we have it. I have to tell my little story. Like,
yep.
It's a beautiful piece. It just wasn't for me. Someone else.
You're withholding it from someone who really wanted it and needed it. And the other tip I would give is if you're working towards a certain size, because that also tends to be the reason why we keep hanging on to clothes in our closet for maybe way longer than we should. If you're working towards a weight goal and you are very certain that one day you will fit into these clothes, I understand it can be hard to get rid of those because you don't want to then have to, spend more money on new clothes. But I would say out of sight, out of mind. At least take those clothes, box them up, put them up somewhere, because as you mentioned before, it's not just about clearing space. It's about that emotional, that feeling when you walk into your closet. And if you walk into your closet and you see things that you don't really like as someone gave you, they don't really fit, it's scratchy and itchy, that is a downer. That is, something that we don't need in our closet. We just need the things that make us feel good. It should be a sanctuary. And I feel like it's purgatory sometimes.
Okay, here was the other question that I wanted to ask you earlier, but then I led us on a tangent. I'll take responsibility. But when you talk about the things in our closet and the transactional, which has brought it back up for me again, once we find our style, can it be timeless? I mean, it might have different iterations, but can our style be timeless?
Absolutely.
So what would it look like?
That's a tough question because I think for everyone, you could say, okay, then I'm going to adopt a classic style, in style terms, classic style. So there's things that when you're talking stylistically, they have been denoted as classic. But what I want to layer on top of that is, what is your unique personal style? Because it may be your personal style, but not also considered to be a classic styled piece. So I think what you have to really tune into is does this garment really represent me and something I see myself wearing for many, many more years to come? Not something that has just like a flash in the pan, and that I'm going to like this season, but I'm probably not going to want to wear next season. And you can kind of get a sense of what maybe those things are by just looking in your closet and what you've continued to wear over the years, and the things that maybe you tried and then kind of went away after a year. But I would just say, like, it's easy to kind of get caught up and say, okay, I want my style to last, so then I must like a classic style. But I understand that not everybody likes a classic style.
Right.
Maybe they want something a little more creative, or they want something.
But that is a style, right? A creative.
That is a style. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that's one of the things we do too when I'm working with clients, is to define their 3 personal style words. And it's very unique to them. And it's,
Ellie, what do you mean? Like, if there's 3 words, what might they be? I know it's going to be different for different folks, but
yeah. So I'll share mine. Mine are classic, feminine, and bold. And the way I like to think of those is they work all together, not separately. So for example, if I were just to say I have a feminine style, that might conjure up a lot of different images for different people. For me, I see lots of frills and bows, and I might see some pastel colors, very, very feminine dresses, things like that. And while I do like some of those things, that feels a bit too extreme for me. A little bit too heavily focused on the feminine piece. I still like an element. I love classic pieces. So I could wear a blazer every day of the week. I love button downs. I love trench coats. I love some of these very classic styles. I love the wide leg, Audrey Hepburn pants, that have been around since her days. But I also like this element of boldness. And I think it comes from just that creative aspect of me. So boldness might be in that I combine colors in a different way, or I pair something very feminine with something sort of rough, like a moto jacket with a dress, or a blazer with a more feminine dress. So to me, when the perfect outfit comes together, when those 3 things are all present in my outfit, so there's maybe a bend to something classic, there's some maybe little feminine element, and there's also something bold, whether it is the combination or the colors or whatever it may be. So I really encourage, and we go through a number of, exercises to kind of help them get at what those 3 words are for them. But then that drives, what we choose moving forward. And it's really fun to just kind of come up with what those are and just let yourself have fun and be creative, and, let that flow. And then I can help sort of connect the dots with what I'm hearing from them, as you are doing with me. Sometimes the unspoken.
That would make shopping so much easier. Like, if I'm going shopping and I pick up something, well, that's pretty cool. And I go, well, is it whatever my 3 are? Is it classic or an element of boldness? Is it feminine? Like, does it even fit within my concept?
Yes.
If it doesn't, put it aside, at least for now.
Yeah. Well, and it's in the garment itself, but then in how you style it. Because, for example, this blazer I would consider to be very classic. It's a linen white blazer. They've been around forever. They'll forever be around. But it's in how I take it and style it then. And that's really kind of where your 3 words come into play.
But you're not taking every option. You're not going to take, you're not going to take a blazer that you're thinking, oh, that's very bold. That's a good 1 season blazer. That's not whatever. So.
Yeah. Yeah. It just helps you kind of get back in tune. And I think the thing I've realized too is that women haven't really kind of taken a step back to think about all this. fashion and shopping just happens so quickly. And I know this as a marketer, that as soon as you step foot in a store, you're getting tempted, and people are telling you, sales associates are telling you need to buy this. There's now influencers on social peddling things and must-haves of the season. And, there's just a lot of confusing messages out there. And then on top of that, sales, and they're pulling on you emotionally. So it gets very confusing once you get to the store. That's why I say, before we ever start shopping, let's start by just thinking about who you are here, who you want to become. What is that ideal version of you? And then we can go in the store, because we're much more intentional and judicial by that point.
I so love your examples. I mean, I can visualize that happening and thinking about that. You just nailed me on a couple of things. I'm going, well, those are not quality. I probably should hang on to one thing. When was the last time you wore it? Well, that's
yeah.
And or you think about, I won't be able to replace it. I'm going, okay, if you haven't worn it in 6 years, what makes you think the rush to replace it?
Nope, you're not gonna. Yeah, that's one of the questions. I have a closet detox guide, which I can share with your audience if you like.
Oh,
that's
that
one
would
of the, yeah. One of the questions I ask is, if you haven't worn it in the past year or since last season, that it would have come up. Unless it's a special occasion dress, like a little black dress that maybe you don't wear every year. It's probably time for it to go. There's a reason you're not grabbing for it. It's a color you don't like. You don't like how it fits on your body. There's a reason you're not grabbing it. So trust yourself and just allow yourself to let it go.
Yeah, I think that's so fun. It's hard. I mean, it's a mental thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once you start, it's like, that wasn't so bad. But I also learned a trick. Someone suggested to me, they say, if you're not sure you're really going to let it go, it's similar to what you say, like pack away the clothes you want in the future.
Oh, yeah.
Put it in a box, label it, possible donation, ?
Yep.
Garage. And really, if it's 6 months from now and you haven't even been tempted to get back in that box, it needs to go.
Yeah. I have a maybe pile at all times. And sometimes I keep thinking about that item, and so I'll pull it out. And other times, if I haven't even missed it in my closet, I have no problems letting it go.
Doesn't that feel great? You're going.
It feels great. It feels so amazing. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to go through the questions of really trying to get in tune with yourself before you can start to make some of those decisions too, because it's hard to just be completely honest when you're kind of not sure if you're ready to say, this is who I am. Yeah. Like that's gone. That's an old me. I'm ready to let that go. This is me, and I'm ready to embrace that.
So I think if we can share the link to your closet detox tips, that would be sweet. Because I know that's something, if you don't need it today, you'll need it at some point.
And you can do it in bits and pieces. Mostly that's encouraged, because it can be very emotional and daunting if you have a closet full of stuff. But yeah, there's information in the guide about how to get organized, how to get motivated to start, and then a bunch of great questions just to kind of get you really more intentional about the process.
So let's talk about how people can find you if they're interested in working with you or going through trainings with you. Talk a little bit more about that for us, would you?
Absolutely. So if you're interested in working with me or bringing me to your organization to speak, you can find me. I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Ellie Steinbrink. You can also go to my website, elliesteinbrink.com. Sarah will have to put a link there so you don't have to figure out how to spell my last name. And I'm also on Instagram. So if you just want a little inspiration, I'm at style.decoded on Instagram.
So we'll put all those in the show notes because, of course, we want to make it easy for our listeners. So go to the show notes. All her hyperlinks will be in there, as well as a link to her handout. And so I want to ask you a parting word of advice or encouragement for all of us who want to feel more like we're authentically our own style gurus, if you will.
Yes. So I would say this is a lesson that I've learned not just through style, but a life lesson. And that is really learn to tune into yourself and trust yourself. there are going to be plenty of people that think they know better about what you need to do or shouldn't do, but only you really know what's great for you. And so I would just encourage you to try to tune more into what's inside and trust it.
Good advice, Miss Ellie. And again, if you're tuning into what's inside, you have to have a little breathing space to do that. Even if it's just 5 minutes, take it. So I would encourage you, if you've listened to this and you've taken anything away from it, please like and share the episode, because I'd like more people to find out about Ellie, number one. But also, if you have comments or questions or thoughts about style, put them in the comments so that Ellie and I can see what you're thinking about style, how it's affected you positively, negatively, what you've learned that maybe other listeners would benefit from knowing your own experience. We'd love to see those wherever you're listening to this in the comments section. And with that, I will say we'll see you next week on the No Labels, No Limits podcast. Until then, be your true author.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic business coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. Please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Till next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.